Hello and welcome to another episode of Perseus Conversations. Today we have Nathan. He is an expert, very good, experienced practitioner in Tai Chi, in internal arts, in Hermetics. So it'd be great to have a chat with him today. So I'm going to bring him on now, and we will go through his approach to this kind of training. Welcome, Nathan.
Hello, you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Would you like to give the audience a brief introduction to who you are and what you do?
My name's Nathan, and on the YouTubes, the Maverick Mystic. What I do is a very difficult thing to put into an elevator pitch, as it's entirely dependent upon who it is that I'm speaking to or working with, and their particular path and aspirations and interests, etc., etc. But we could look at it as sort of a liberative style of spiritual evolution.
Wow. Wow, that perfect. Perfect. Okay, great. And so, I mean, I knew you, I think first from seeing your Tai Chi, um, and then also seeing you doing some awesome things with energetics. So let's go back and just sort of what started you on the path. Obviously, you can keep it as detailed or as vague as you like, but what got you into Tai Chi, and what got you into Tai Chi and not other martial arts, maybe?
Well, prior to Tai Chi, I did a couple of years of karate. This is as a kid. Um, and yeah, I mean, there was something that appealed to me about the martial arts as a kid. And I think like most people who get into martial arts, it's because you have a desire to control and manipulate the world around you,
Mm.
which we could say is like a very kind of dense, uh, low level of, being a human. But that's, I think, why most people get into martial arts is through various circumstances, um, various types of trauma, etc. Life has orchestrated itself in certain ways, and we have an aversion to how things turned out. So if we can impose our will on the environment around us,
Mm.
this allows us a sense of agency, a sense of control. So I think that's probably why I got into martial arts from the karate standpoint, alongside the joy of the physical movement and the fun of throwing punches and kicks and spinning, jumping, side kicks and all that fun stuff. There's the fantastical, Jackie Chan side of things
Yeah.
from the movies, and then there's the sense of control, I think, is the underlying thing for many of us, though.
I think
In
I
terms,
agree. Yeah, I think that control, the fear aspect of wanting to control all the possible things that we might find a bit scary is a big motivator for a lot of us, right?
mm, absolutely, and like, I mean, that sort of takes you into the Tai Chi thing, which is how do I manipulate the world around me more subtly, um, you know, um, and so one of the things that appealed to me with Tai Chi, back to your first question, was prior to that, during the karate phase, which was ages 9 to 11 or so, I was also watching a bunch of Dragon Ball Z back in the day.
Oh,
And so, I'd go to bed and I'd be like, just plan, like, oh, this feeling between my hands, this is chi, just like in and of my own accord in relation to that show. This is like energy, this is my energy. Oh, I could do this. I could jump out of a 2-story, 3-story building on my hands and be fine. Like all these thoughts that I'm happy I didn't act on necessarily. And then I met a Tai Chi teacher who was talking about Chi, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's what that is." And of course, as a kid, I was like, "I knew that. I came up with that." Right? I'd never heard it outside of my own brain going, "Yeah, that's your energy," and seeing a TV show. Um, so that was a big part of it, was this allure of chi and energy and the curiosity about the thing behind the thing behind the thing, the realms unseen. What
Wow,
about
wow.
yourself?
The mystery. I think similar in a way. I mean, I actually, yeah, I started off with Tai Chi, but being a youngster, I was kind of, I was looking for action, you know, and so I didn't really appreciate what I had. I had a close teacher who taught Tai Chi, Xingyi, Bagua, and I think back and think, what an idiot. I, I should have stayed. I should have stayed, but I went chasing the shiny things, and saw him years later, and he just sort of chuckled at me. It's like, yeah, you know, it's the way it goes.
Mm.
But yeah, I agree. It's like you know, it's that what's behind that? What's behind that? Which kind of puts us on this path that we're all on. But yeah, okay, well, so that sort of inspired you, and I completely can relate to the Dragon Ball Z as well. I mean, I think that's probably inspired more people than many people know that
Yeah,
show.
first it was David Carradine's Kung Fu, then it was
Yeah,
Dragon Ball Z, like the next generation.
the progression. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. You see Kane doing his thing, and think, okay, but then Dragon Ball Z comes along. It's like, oh, okay, superpowers. Yeah. So yeah, I can completely relate to that. So wow, so you went on that journey with the Tai Chi, and I mean as well, having that experience of the energy yourself early on, and then that confirmation. I
I
mean,
think that's
and
part of the
also,
excitement was the confirmation.
mm, yeah, the change in worldview is like it's real. Oh my gosh,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
you know, it's a real thing. So I think it's quite
yeah, we're both getting, I think,
yeah.
cut off a little bit here.
A little bit of a freeze there. Yeah. So I was just saying, like, when you have that confirmation of like, you know, that it's not just in my head, and that you think, oh, this is real. It the whole world kind of opens up again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a an element, I think this is a really important element actually, when it comes to sort of your own ownership of an experience, and to have something be confirmed instead of spoken or taught at you, right? So you
Mm,
have the experience and then it gets confirmed or validated. There's something about that particular relationship to an experience, especially when it comes to subtle, what to many might seem like subtle work with the energetics. There's definitely something about the ownership that takes place and how that sets a tone of not just excitement, but also like you believe that you were part of what's going on, that you have that
mm,
connection, as opposed to needing it to be spoon fed to you through seeking, outside help. Not that I didn't do that. I certainly, over the years at various times found different types of teachers in different realms. But I think like deep down, that was
mm.
in there, for sure.
Yeah. So you even so after that initial experience with the energy, you yourself, even outside of other teaching, you were delving deeper and deeper and peeling the layers back and discovering, you know, different aspects of energy and experience before you were sort of openly taught that.
Yeah, and then when I was sort of, openly taught it, it was in a very vague way. So that
Mm.
was my first Tai Chi teacher who had experience with Chi and, had had some like telekinetic type of experiences and had built a lot of it up through Tai Chi, but had never
Wow.
really trained in any way how to build Chi specifically. It was
Mhm.
all sort of through these like the mirrors or the reflection of exercises that you might do, and that's, I think, one of the biggest flaws, we might say, or maybe not flaw, but uh, things that slows people down on the evolution
Mm.
based off whatever system they're in, is that the exercise is given as a reflection of the actual thing in the mirror, right? So it's like, okay, you do
Ah,
this thing and maybe this happens, right?
I see.
And
Yeah.
so I think working with reflections, it can lead you, you might actually see the thing that's creating the reflection, but you might be looking off at an angle and you can't see the thing that's creating,
Mm,
the reflection, so to speak. So there's like pros and cons to that, and it can consume a lot of energy and just, I mean, in a sense, waste a lot of time when you're just doing a thing to allow what happens to happen, depending on where you want to go. There is also a lot of value that you can get in, say standing practice, right?
mm.
Let's say, I went through phases where, maybe I stood 4 hours every morning, or would do retreats for myself, and maybe there was 8 hours of standing in a day and 4 hours form and a
Wow,
couple
that's
hours of
awesome.
sitting, and those would be like more condensed retreats. And I would do these for myself. This is when I was in my 20s, just in my apartment for over the Christmas, New Year's time for like a
Mm,
couple of weeks. And there's a lot of value that you can get out of just doing a thing, right? And under the assumption that if you do more of it, more stuff will expose itself to you, which it does. But sometimes, it's nice to have a little bit more direction in terms of where it is you might want to be going, especially if your interests are in the esoteric, right? The
mm,
subtle worlds behind worlds behind worlds behind worlds. That's that can take a little bit more precision, because what happens is you just do a thing, and then whatever, sitting practice, standing, and you'll move through states and frequencies and relationships to different like cosmic events, etc. And you'll just pass right on by without ever having the ability to recognize particular places,
I see.
you know?
Yeah.
And there's so much value in being able to recognize and return, and also to not need the, you know, 3 day, 3 days of 16 hours a day of samadhi warm up, into
The
these
warm up.
deeper spaces, right? And it's like, it's literally like, you look at like a Vipassana retreat, the first 3 days are like anapana, you're sharpening the knife. And that's like your warm up. If you're doing a longer retreat, 3 months, maybe the first month is a warm up. If you're doing a
Mm,
5 year like living thing, the first year of like your vow of silence is just getting over all your weird habits that you think you need to talk all the time and think all the time, and all this stuff. There's always
mm,
a warm-up period. And so with having access to and um, recognition of some of those realms that you move through when you're doing a deep, prolonged meditative process, it allows us to kind of start from those points. And so there's
mm.
always value on both sides. Just sort of depends what it is that your aims are.
Well, so when you were doing, so previously you were doing that, which is already quite incredible, because it takes a lot to sort of self motivate to do 4-6 hours a day or more. So that's already pretty epic. But at what point did you start to find a different way, a different approach to reach those states?
It sort of initially happened by necessity, because I could no longer do those long hours. I couldn't pull it. I worked myself to death's door, more or less.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, like, we all have our motivations for doing things, and uh, what I know from myself and what I see in other people who have, really, like, the discipline bucket is full. Like, you've
Mm,
got the discipline thing. Um, it's, there's reason for that. And there's certainly value in it, but it can definitely lead you astray. And there seems to be a thing with people who are obsessed with the martial arts side of things, or with the training mindset. You
mm,
hit, and this happened to me 20 years earlier than it does to most people, where they hit maybe 40, 45, and then maybe 50, and then you get weird health stuff and you almost die. And this isn't only because you train like a demon. It's because you're filled with contention. You're filled with hatred. You're filled with fuel for discipline, for that hard style discipline. You're filled with a need to prove yourself, to earn your own self-respect, to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things which are ultimately quite negative, but they fuel that platform of practice. And, you know, there's value in that. Again, there's always, both sides always have their thing. And there's a hell of a lot you can learn out of that dogged discipline, especially when it comes to meditative pursuits. Like I would, every time I would add an hour of meditation, I wouldn't necessarily need to sleep as much. I might, like for 2 hours of meditation in a day, I'd lose the need for 1 hour of sleep, or maybe it was the reverse. I can't remember. But what would happen is, okay, now I didn't need that sleep, so I'd use it for more meditation or for more training or for more whatever. And it was very funny because you just keep, like, the alarm would just go an hour earlier. So I do something and I go, oh, this is a good exercise. Well, anything that's worth doing is worth doing for a minimum of an hour a day. That was sort of the mindset, right? And to the point where, I mean, there was a time where I was waking up at 2:45 every morning. And, you know, I'd do a retreat, you know, like a 6-hour day of training before going to teach, and teach a couple of classes, work out, journal, tea, training in the afternoon, you know, like rice buckets and whatever it is I was doing, more teaching in the evening, get home, you know, again, rigid, dogged 2 hours like samadhi before bed. Doesn't matter when you get home. If it's, you know, midnight, you sleep, you know, or yeah, midnight, you practice till 2, you sleep till 2:45, you wake up and you do your morning 2 hours of meditation. And like you get to such a degree of discipline, we could call it, that there's no fight against yourself. There's no resistance. What you say you do, and that's it. There's literally no resistance. So you release the tensions of fatigue, those disappear. You release all the parts of yourself that would stop you, and it is easy to go. But you also, as a byproduct of that, end up releasing your safety mechanisms. That maybe fatigue is because you need to rest, not because you're weak-willed. Maybe, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe all these signals that the body gives, that the mind gives, when it's absent of energy, isn't because you're poorly skilled, but things like depression can onset because of no energy, right? Lack of motivation because you have no energy. So you learn to work those and just go in the absence of everything. And that takes you down a very slippery slope. So that was sort of how I had to start making a change. Yeah, man, that was sort of.
I can relate a little bit to that story. Actually, I've never looked at it, I suppose, closely, like, but the way you explain it actually does sort of explain my 20s. Like, you know, living an hour outside of London and driving into London at 4 a.m. for a practice, and then driving outside of London and driving to work and doing
Yeah,
work and then
man.
driving back
Like,
to London.
oh,
You know,
dude, I used to like
day.
eat in the car. You know, like I'd finish teaching, and you know, this is like after a full day of teaching and training and whatever. It's like, you know, 7 o'clock, and then I'd run from my class to my car, drive downtown, trying to shovel food into my into my mouth as I was driving downtown, so that I could go take a class, you know, in you know, like pragmatic martial arts and box, like just like real streety stuff. And you know, you do that, so exciting. Then you know, I would get there late because I couldn't get there on time because it started literally when the class finished. And then you train, then you hang, then you go home and practice and etc. So this definitely, it paves the way for a need to change, because you have to. And so you progress from discipline and like a feverish type of discipline to essentially joy and excitement and a type of love for what you're doing, but more so like joy and excitement. It's like, it's just fun. The discipline part you have to start to let go of. And in a sense, that gives you more free energy. But it's not free energy. It is just another source of energy, which you can burn out, which I did. And I burned through that, because the underlying part of the discipline and all that stuff, that was still alive. And that was the thing running the show with the new fuel sources, right? And so this got to a point where things were so bad from a health standpoint. I would wake up in the morning and try to figure out how to get up, like how to, because the excitement for your day, it burns adrenaline. Excitement and fear are like the same thing, just perceived from the mind differently, as far as I can tell. And so so the energy to actually get out of bed and move, it just wasn't there. So I'd have to try to figure out how to get up, because it just, everything was gone. And there was like a good chunk of years where things were pretty not so good. You have one day out of every 6 weeks that you don't need to nap for 5 hours in the middle of the day, and all kinds of weird stuff. So we all have our that fall, so to speak. And then you have to try to figure out how to get back from that. And this leads you down a whole bunch of different rabbit holes from a health standpoint. And you go from researching peak performance to like how to get out of bed, and it's like a pretty big shift,
goals.
right?
Yeah, that's really so. I mean, how long did it take you to get yourself back to like a healthy state from that? How long did that take?
I'm still working on it.
Yeah, still a process. Yeah, but I
Yeah,
mean,
I
in
mean,
body, you're looking good.
oh shucks, thanks, dude. Yeah, but there's a lot of rest, right? There's a lot of not living, like we could say, like as high vibrationally in terms of the things that do spark up the spirit, and being like alive all the time, because is much fun as that is, often that energy is needed to recuperate in different ways. So it's something I'm still working on. And every year that goes by, things get better. Eyes get whiter, just the health keeps
It's
improving.
interesting you say it though, because it's like I can very much relate, and I've never really paid much thought. I never really paid much thought to that, but I can definitely see that in myself as well. It's like the obsession to chase after this thing, and just it has to be done. It has to be done, and that in the UK and also here in Taiwan, I had another teacher, and the same. It was like he was actually very much like that. His whole thing was will discipline, and I chased it with that same energy. And it does, you do pay a price. I certainly don't think I could do 10% of the training I used to do now. Now I'm like, all right, 100 kettlebells a day, I'm done. You know, you know, that's
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
I
it
did my
sets a
bit.
tone though. It sets a tone, and it sets like an understanding of yourself and respect, like,
Mm,
so when you've done that kind of stuff, um, you you trust your ability to do things, and
mm,
you start to develop a type of faith in yourself, in the sense that, like, that you're not just making shit up. You know,
Yeah.
you, especially when you start getting more subtle and more subtle and more subtle, and you start like working your way, working with, you know, planetary magic and constellational magic and deity yoga and all this stuff that's, you know, seems from a certain standpoint like a bunch of bullshit. And you go, oh, well, that's for new age people. Constellational work
Mm.
comes with 12 cats that you got to take care of, and, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, maybe you, like, because of this work, this platform that you set for yourself, you know that there's a reality to things. And so when you do start working on with something that might seem far-fetched to many, there's something very tangible to it. And
Mm.
this, I think it can set a very good framework. But like you said, if
Yeah.
I see teachers, like people who are obsessed with discipline, are at a certain stage of their own process of growth and evolution from a spiritual standpoint, and it serves a purpose and a very valuable purpose. But I do think it is, you know, more in the rudimentary stages of the
Mm. Mm.
developmental process. And so people that get stuck there, I think that's a good indication,
Yeah.
that their view of what they do, and then as such a view of a student, is about essentially limitations. And so a teacher that's in
Mm.
that place will, in certain ways, to the eyes of a student who's in a similar place, the student will be very excited. Oh, this teacher tells me exactly what I need to do. This is great. And every time a teacher goes, not like that, like this, and you get excited, you bring something to a teacher and they go, yeah, 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 but this, they are creating limitations that you will have to surrender to later. And those blockages, those go in deep, is when you're in the position of
Yes.
a student. And I think that, like, being a good teacher, it takes a hell of a lot more than most of us give it credit for, because it's the least important part, in my opinion, these days of teaching, is the
Mm.
information that you share with people, that you are obviously teaching. That becomes like the least important part.
Mm.
And that stuff can be used as platforms, but your obligation as the teacher themselves starts to evolve is to the freedom of the individual, to the freedom of
Yeah.
the spirit, and to the you know, karmic ripple effect that flows through that individual
Mm.
into everything that they will hopefully ripple through. So you get nodes within nodes within nodes, central nodes of, you know, like, which we describe this, like, you have central nodes and then you have peripheral nodes. So you essentially have the peripheral node to your central node, right, is a central
Yeah.
node to other peripheral nodes,
Yes.
which is a central node. So everything, this web of cause and effect and karma, starts to become a very tangible thing. And the
Mm.
more developed a teacher becomes, the more understanding is given to that, and the more freedom is given to the student to explore whatever it is that is of their path to explore, without the inhibiting impositions of the teacher going,
Mm.
hey, this is the path for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, the dog's gonna run out here. There we go.
There you go.
All right.
No worries. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
So important. So important because it's. I think, like you say, it's. I know in my past, um, it's all played a role, obviously, but yeah, sometimes when teachers are still learning as well, and sometimes don't realize the full implications of that relationship and that interaction on the student. So yeah, I think
Mm.
that's super important. 'Cause as you say, people can spend years undoing well-intentioned
That's
work.
the thing. Exactly. Like, I'm
Yeah.
happy you said that, because it's all the damage that can be done. Like, okay,
Mm.
what got me training like a demon is I met a teacher who trained like a demon himself, and I
Yeah.
went, "What? People can do that? Pfft, I'm in." Right? And so it was again, though, it was a validation to something that I
Mm.
was already I already had a proclivity towards. So, but the behind it is of course there's a type of goodwill, but that, or at least desire to help. But that desire to help has its foundation in that, we might call him a mentor, that mentor's own shit that hasn't been resolved. So all of that stuff that will take them down as time goes on is being transferred to you. If you're an open student who really wants to learn. And this is why it's so important that we actually, have some inclination towards, developing as a human on the spiritual path. Is if you're going to be sharing stuff, your subconscious stuff is going to transfer. Because any student who really wants to learn opens themselves up as fully and completely as possible, so that you can learn. And you see, like, in a funny way, let's say at a Tai Chi class or a martial arts class or something, a teacher will demonstrate something and there's like 50 students behind them, like trying to like do the subtle body mechanics, and or the teacher has a mannerism, whatever it is, they like make points doing this, or they hold their hands a certain way while they're talking, and maybe they're doing a little mudra or whatever while they're having a chat with people. And the student, okay, I see this, I see that. But the actual depth of the transference is occurring so much more deeply than, like, look, he did this and that and the other thing, all that stuff.
All the subconscious stuff. Wow, very important stuff, man. And just as like I say, like it's actually reminded me of a lot of a lot of my experiences as well. I can very much relate to those. Let's look at some other things now. Like
Sure,
let's
man.
look at sort of so we've got the Tai Chi, the internal arts, the external. Now, I know. I mean, I suppose some people have like maybe a natural openness to energetics. So let's maybe going down the energetics route. Um, I know I certainly didn't. I've definitely felt like it took a lot of work to kind of get what again, like what I thought I was supposed to be doing with energetics or with elements or with other frequencies. So how do you, as a teacher, take someone who is they want this thing, they want these experiences, they want to go down this path, but they're quite a closed, maybe their bodies are quite closed, and they just find it difficult to get these experiences with the energetics. How do you work with a student like that?
Firstly, why do you want the stuff? So a big part of my teaching is around the opening of the perspective, beyond the desired skills, because I see when people pursue like energetic skill, and often power and skill and ability to influence the world, that often more harm is done than good. And people start walking through life, thinking that they're sort of the puppeteer of the environment around them. And you start treating people and situations like puppets, and I think it's a really negative, there's a very deep egocentric relationship that's occurring there. So the first stage always is, I'll get to in a minute, sort of like, waking this up in people. But much more important is the karmic ripple effect, as mentioned before. So if you're going to open people up to subtle energy and influence, then, well, what karmic webs am I now connected to as a teacher? So I have no interest in teaching the type of student who is at the stage of this need for, being able to work with energy and this stuff. There's a prerequisite, which is you figure out why it is that you want to do this stuff, and you actually start moving on the path of being a good person who actually has people's best interests at heart. That is primary importance. That alone can offer you tremendous, what could we call it, when success, we could say, when it comes to working with energy, even without having any conscious or direct relationship to or skill with energy, what you do with a perspective like that can be incredibly healing to people. I met a woman once, man, who no energetic training whatsoever. Tried talking her through some meditations. This is many years ago. Couldn't feel anything, couldn't, like, nothing. But she's a type of person that, let's say somebody who's always struggling with weight issues and complaining about how they look, when they're hanging out with this friend of mine, for that time, let's say it's a week, their partner won't hear them make a single comment about how they look or their weight. Why is that? Because this friend of mine has somehow tapped into looking at people without judgment and offering people their potential on a platter. What is it that you really want in this life? That's amazing. Go for it. That's so exciting. Never putting barriers in front of people. So with zero meditative and energetic training or skill, she does better work than many who have a lot of meditative skill and energetic training. So I want to make sure that's really clear, because it's important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So when it comes to actually waking up skills in people, I go through a process. I have a pretty good introductory process for building up a connection with life force and working this through the body and through the field in a way that's progressive and people can tune into it. And it depends on, the type of situation. If it's like teaching over the course of, a week at a retreat and I have full days, if it's doing like a 1 hour, 2 hour one-off meditation for a group of people, then I'm less concerned with teaching people how to, and more so, okay, here's energy, you can feel it. Now I take them through a process energetically and have them continue to focus on the basics of feeling the energy as there's another process occurring. It sort of depends on, how you want to work.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, depending. So basically, let's say let's say you've got someone for a retreat setting. In terms of that, because I think, like you said before, that like this stuff can happen very quickly in the right environment and with the right motivations. So in terms of a retreat setting, without a forceful way, in a very nice, open, relaxed way, these processes can sort of take shape in a maybe a month retreat. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it like, I mean, if it's feeling energy, I can have you do that in 2 minutes. For most people, it depends on how deep you want to go, right? In terms of like, like in martial arts, people go like, okay, how long does it take till I'm good at this stuff? It's like, what do you mean by good? And what stuff are we talking about? So
I should have been more accurate with my question. I apologize.
Oh, that's not a shot at you. I'm thinking of past experiences as students. So it depends on what it is that we're talking about. And what it is that a student's really, what their aspirations are. Many people don't want what they think they want, right? And there's, and not, I'm not saying that I know what you actually want. I might be able to see fairly deep, behind layers, behind layers, behind layers, behind layers. But it's really important that the mindset is kept, from the teacher's perspective, very, very open, so that you don't create, again, limitations for a person. Now, let's say this last retreat that I did, it was a week, and so 7 days, and we did a couple days of energy strength training, which is in relation to life force and more looking at life force and fascia. And I have a bunch of different methods for connecting the body in different ways in relation to more, we could say, like hard output, right? So like more like daily use, or like if you're like hiking, or you're carrying 50 pounds on your back, or like rucking, whatever it is you might want to be doing, heavier work at the gym, moving weights around, not just like, and it's certainly a place to start, and this is where we do start, is static holds, right? And this is the, from the genius of Mark Rasmus, is static life force, tune into life force, static work, whatever it is, hold up a deadlift bar, or pop a bench press like an inch off the rack or whatever, and you just hold it and release it into life force. So that's like, of course, the place to start is static, because you have to focus on the life force and the release. And in the beginning, it can be a lot. But I take people in the energy strength training through movement, and then work so that people can start to be more comfortable with life force in like a moment by moment stuff. You work with nature magic, is phenomenal for working with life force, and it opens up doors when it comes to understandings of life and death, and the permeability of perceived form or perceived identity, and the malleable nature of life force as it arises into the shape of a particular life, and secedes and arises again into the shape of a different life. And it's a really interesting approach. So we do nature magic, nature energy work, in conjunction with the more weighted, heavier weight energy strength training, and again, moving those weights around. And if the people in the workshop are martial artists, then it's, I can use that as an easy through path and example. But personally, I have no interest in helping somebody hit harder because they want to learn how to hit harder, or steal balance because they want to manipulate others. So I'll use partner work, but in a very specific way, where it's not about influencing the other person. It's about them perceiving your influence on them when you make changes to yourself and to your field. And this is a tweak that I've made just from my own. It's just this current iteration of my teaching, as it acts as a type of safety mechanism to the cultivation of a grandiose ego and a manipulative mindset, and the degradation in terms of how we view others in our surroundings, which has become very important to me. So we always have, like if we're looking at cause and effect, we have positive pressurizations and negative pressurizations. And a very positive pressurization can create a very negative effect or a very positive effect. It depends on how big your perceptual identity and time span can fractal out, right? So anyway, we look at a lot of that stuff, and then I bring people into a relationship. We deepen the stillness component, and that takes the life force into what in Hermetics we might call more of an astral type of energy. Now, often this is looked at as like, okay, you have life force, you have astral energy, you have mental energy, you have akasha, then you have light. And absolutely, but this is a spectrum. There's like life force is life force is life force is astral, which has still a relationship to life force, is eventually all the astral planes and this crazy stuff is also mental, right? It's not only segmented, in these easy to understand chunks. It's all interwoven, right? You have the ebb, the dance, the flow of the vibrational scale within itself. It breathes through itself, right up to the highest, where everything disappears, where akasha disappears and light disappears, and you have this weird like thing where that's like the thing. It gets a little wordy to like, you can't really word it out. So we spend a couple of days exploring the astral substrate, exploring psychic self-defense, which I initially was introduced to through a nature tradition, where this was Tom Brown Jr.'s tracker school, his philosophy skills. This is 15 years ago. And they would play with a lot of this energy stuff. It's the only thing outside Hermetics that I've ever encountered that has a very precise relationship to energetic stuff. And so like you'll be in a room with people, just like with Hermetics, you know, if you're around people who train and, you know, are actually tapped, and you like are like you have a moment where you're just like, oh, you know, you're feeling like a pain of the heart or whatever, and someone would be like, hey bro, like get your shit together. Like you're bringing the room down. Like, hey, who just got sad? This is ridiculous. You know, and of course, if like, you know, you're living in a house with a bunch of like people doing that stuff, you know, there's someone's always trying to fuck with somebody. I talked with one guy who would leave like, he called it, sorry guys, but like energetic, from an energetic perspective, like itchy butt bubbles for people to walk through, and then just sit there and wait to see if people would walk through it and like scratch their butt. So, you know, like these different like systems of proof.
You've opened up a whole new world to me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so sorry to your partner.
Wow.
So that was where I was first introduced to using energy, right? Was in the realm of nature. And why it might be useful and a necessity to have some precognition if there's, you know, a threat coming, or if you want to find a bed of, you know, where deers might lie to hunt, or you want to find food, how it might be helpful to be able to surrender into stillness and ask the question, where can I go for food? Where is the nearest, you know, edible food? And you get some sense as to the direction. So that was where I first encountered this. Now, how you get to stillness is important, because we're looking at this interesting dynamic between intuition and instinct, which many confuse instinct for intuition, and instinct being to preservation and intuition being to evolution. And it's a very important distinguishment to make, because many who start doing some personal work go, it's my intuition says blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, maybe, but maybe it wasn't your intuition. Maybe it was your instinct. And maybe it's the reason it feels like the right thing to do is because it is what you have always done. Whereas when you're working from the light, illumined intuition versus the illumined instinct, from the illumined intuition, you will have this weird experience where you go, oh, well, this sucks. Mentally, emotionally, physically, this sucks. But I know it's the thing to do. And you don't know why. It doesn't make sense yet. And I'm sure you've had this experience yourself where you're like, okay, this is the way to go. It sucks in every respect. It doesn't make any sense in any logical way whatsoever, but I know this is the thing to do. You follow that light, that illumined intuition, and it always, when you look back, you're like, whoa, I'm happy I made that decision, because it leads you through whatever process you need to go through.
Yeah.
So
wow, very interesting. Your camps, your retreats sound amazing.
So, well, thanks, man. Guys, come. So this is part of the astral training, is how do we move into and cultivate stillness? And the best method I've ever found is the Franz Barden method of the elements in their respective body regions, and then I've sort of evolved that a little bit in a couple of ways that I find enhances the perspective that allows for stillness, as opposed to trying to impose location and stillness on the elements in a way that is inhibiting and confining. So this process, anyway, point being, this process of harmonizing the elements, this allows for stillness. And without stillness, without harmony of the elements in mind, in emotion, in body, the chances of tapping into the illumined intuition in any truthful way is greatly, greatly inhibited, right? So to build up a ritual that can offer silence, so you can actually listen to something coming through and maybe have a slightly more than 50-50 chance that it's not instinct based and preservation based, and that it's actually something from somewhere else. Well, and if you need to look at this at this time, or if the listener needs to view this at this time as like your higher self or your lower self, you go for it. Then this stuff keeps evolving, but we all are coming at this work from wherever we're at, and many come from a space of being closed and locked in to a very sciencey mindset that is what's the word for it? Cynical, right? A very cynical, sciencey mindset. And so that can be one of some of the hardest types of people to open up is when you try to explain things, you confine them and you create boxes around them. And the creation of these boxes is essentially you're imposing knowns onto the infinite. Which is great because you need to be able to communicate and touch things and work the experience. But also that confined need to be within the identity comfort of the knowns, right? It allows the identity a comfort, something to lean on. Oh, I know this, right? So therefore the identity is safe in terms of it's not being forced to be eradicated or to evolve or to be dissolved or whatever. It's just, okay, this is cool. I can sit here on my knowledge. So anyway, we then progress through working the elements in different ways. And we add a very soft weighted component to the elements, and I introduce a chi dance here, and that's a fun one. This last retreat was the first time I introduced the chi dance, and I think that was a lot of fun. So I'll definitely do that in future. You never know. Like I mean, I teach this stuff, and like there's so many things. People ask like, what will I learn? Like I don't know. Like it's like it's a conversation I have a lot with my buddy Harley, where we're just like, well, like it's really hard if you went to like a bakery and you're like, hey, here's $5, I want a roll of whatever, and they go, cool, go take a nap on that table. You're like, what? No, I paid you for a roll. You're like, yeah, but you're getting a nap on that table. And it's like, okay, next time you go and you ask for a roll and you get, okay, here's like a sack of flour and you're gonna run around the block. I'm like, dude, I want a roll. You come in the next day, give me a roll. They're like, okay, here's the coffee, but you can't drink it. You have to keep it on your head and stand on one leg. And it's like, yeah, but I just want a roll, man. So it's kind of tricky in the sense that there's some stuff that's specific in terms of what people are being taken through and learning, but a lot of the exercises are coming through. Some of them I've literally never done before or heard of before, but it seems like it just comes through as the thing to do, and very often that's people's favorite thing. Right? It's like they're like, oh, my favorite thing was this. I'm like, that's so cool because I've never heard of it before in my life. And so when teaching, you tap into some interesting stuff, some high frequencies, you run that through and you get out of the way as much as you can. And so anyway, this astral development in terms of learning about the elements and how to find stillness is of critical importance. And then we introduce people. I have a nice ritual that I take people through to condense that process. And in a week long, we move through sort of octaving up and down that equanimity and stillness as it falls in and out of itself and starts to deepen into a relationship with the Akasha, which is not one thing. It is all of the stuff and none of the stuff. And it's the bridge to and from form and non-form, as well as the space in which both exist, which is a really weird thing, which is why I call it the Akashic paradox. And just because this need to try to impose borders on it is real weird. So we take people through that, and that's usually where, if someone's gonna like lose their shit, that's where it's gonna happen, where you're gonna finish maybe someone's first Akashic set and they'll just be like, fuck, right? And it's just all this chaos, and then but then the next day it's a hell of a lot easier, and they can actually they're finding resonance in that space. So we have to build the energy up so that we can do something safely and with a background, like working with the Akasha, and of course learning how to will actually work with it, of course, resonate with it, work with it, introductions and explorations with more refined light and drawing energy from the Akasha, working into energy centers through the Akasha, and using, I like to use the Akasha and light and backtrack it into other exercises, and using it to, because when you open up, if you like introduce yourself to, let's say, even like the joint centers from the place of life force, it's a hell of a lot different when you're working with that particular relationship of electromagnetism than when you open up or introduce yourself or mentally transfer whatever yourself into a joint center and look at a joint center from the perspective of Akasha. So you have the Akasha, and then you have, are you viewing Akasha from the perspective of Akasha? Or are you viewing Akasha from the perspective of form, of life force and body? And in the beginning, you're using you to work with Akasha, and you're in separation from Akasha, trying to work with Akasha. But the identity evolves, and you become Akasha, and then you're no longer working with Akasha, you are Akasha. And the identity aspect of this becomes very important, especially then when you start working, and we're still working through that 7-day type of retreat here, where you get the reorganizing and harmonizing relationship with higher intelligence and light. And this is just the beginning, right? This is just the beginning. It's like, often we think like, oh, okay, I have access to Akasha, I have access to light. Everything before that doesn't matter. The elements still matter, because everything that you do with light, with Akasha, anything you do planetarily, constellationally, Kabbalistically, is all permutations of the elements in different scales and at different levels of refinement, and it's all the elements as expressed in different ways, and at different stages of the vibrational scale, different layers of alchemy. So light is the beginning. We get reorganized with light, and this is where the big change starts to occur. When you start working with Akasha, we're leaving behind, maybe that's not the right word, but we're moving deeper than the acquired self, the elements as they've been habitually patterned into us psychologically, emotionally, physically. And we're moving deeper than that, beyond the form with the Akasha. And when we start reorganizing with light from the depths of that place, big change happens, right? And this is a big part of the perceptions of the mind that I work through with people, is the change seems to be pretty profound, and the shift moving forward in life, the relationship to yourself and to everything else seems to get very drastically shifted. And so to help people through this in a way that is not inhibiting, and that is not placing me in the place of the guru or the teacher, the one that's there to like hold somebody's hand and walk them along. I'm not there to like hand feed people. I don't want any part of that type of relationship, because not just because of like my own sort of freedom of not being emotionally leaned on, but it is limiting to the person who's viewing me in that way. It's holding them back on their path. So that's where the perspective becomes so important as we're being reorganized within the grander intelligence that is light and moves through light. At again, that's just the beginning, is to actually be open, right? To not have too many imposed meanings of what it is that you are, who it is that you are, who it is that you're supposed to be, where it is you're supposed to go, how it is that this energy, this light, these skills are supposed to act through you, because these are all limitations. If you think of good and evil in specific ways, these are the things that you will be relinquishing as you progress, as you surrender to more refined frequency. This is the alchemical process, is those densities that are representative of separation, of either or, of duality, those start to dissolve out. And so when people start looking at themselves, it was like, okay, what does a good person do? And they have all these beliefs about what a good person does, how they act in a community, all this stuff. Well, where did that information come from? How was that instilled in this person? So to offer the potential that as people are progressing through these changes, these transformations, that the entire relationship to themselves, to how they relate with themselves, how they relate with their home, their environment, their community, their work, all of this might start to change. And to not to be too scared about that, and to just recognize that it's there, and that they can see things differently, and that being a bad person doesn't necessarily mean what we might think it means, and that it doesn't necessarily mean whatever it is that someone listening to this might think I think it means, right?
Sure.
It's just where you're at. And as the identity fractals out to grander and grander relationships and unifications with cosmic intelligence, it all gets weird, right? And we have to be okay with that. So reorganizing under a greater perspective that, say, light offers is pretty tremendous. So then we explore light and we look at connecting with it in some different ways and using it for a couple of different purposes. And my aims, especially for like a level 1 week-long retreat, which is what we've just discussed, is for people to work with this from the perspective of evolving themselves and any influence you might have on the world around you as being resultant of the evolution of yourself, instead of trying to impose influence on the environment. And this is part of how I build in a bit of a safety mechanism for people and their own karma, their own karmic web, as they're moving forward on this path. So yeah, that's a week 1 type of thing. And of course,
that's
like,
incredible, Nathan. That's incredible.
thanks.
That's a journey.
So I should say that while that is what we go through in a week, each of those stages, right? You could work on. We could easily expand out to a year, right? We could turn that week into a 5-year training process, if we wanted to have the mindset of, you know, who should be in charge of your growth? Me.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea is to offer connection and a bunch of different tools to help facilitate connection, and then people explore sort of where they're at, and it gives a nice roadmap, and they can always get in touch, and we can do private coaching sessions for transmission of any part that is, if a part feels lost. Sometimes life happens, and like in the beginning, if you don't work on like Akasha every day and light every day, sometimes subtle frequencies can start to fade from our ability to find them again. That was one of my hurdles,
Yeah, that's true.
was that personally. And so that's where like people get in touch and you do a session and you reawaken the relationship to that frequency, and then they can, get going again. And once that's settled
Oh,
in, then it's
brilliant.
settled in,
Well, Nathan, I think what you've said there for the level one, I think it sounds amazing, and it's what I think a lot of people. It's certainly what I myself needed as well. Is someone to open the door, someone to put you in contact, and to give you the tools to go on. And like you say, not not sort of putting the boundaries up, not saying it's got to be this way, but just hey,
Mhm.
here's a relationship, introducing that relationship, and then the person takes it in their own way, which is in their own unique way.
Well, what you said there is like, I mean, that leads into another little thing worth discussing, which is, that relationship, right? And it's like, same as if you introduce people. If you introduce two people, and go, hey, I think you guys would really get along. And then you go, okay, but only in the following context. You're not
Okay.
allowed to know each other in any other context other
All right, I
than
see.
whatever it is. So you introduce people to this relationship with these frequencies, and then you gotta like let them go. And one way to do this is not to rob people of the joy of discovery. And that's a phrase from Livingston Taylor, who I think is the musician James Taylor's brother, or he just said that, and because it sounded cool. But when I was 16, I went to a lecture that Livingston Taylor gave, and that was, I think, the most valuable thing that he kept repeating again and again and again was, if you're going to teach music, don't rob your students of the joy of discovery. And so you see this all the time with internal arts and spiritual arts, is like, so someone has an idea, is it kind of like this? And the teacher goes, no, it's like this. And or like, barely a little bit, is it like what you just said? And mostly it's like this. And you just like took that student's excitement and joy and shit on it. So it's like, okay, can you take that excitement? Oh, is it like this? And you improv comedy it, you yes and it, you go 100%. Yeah, totally that's totally a way that we can go with this. That's absolutely
Yes.
like a direction that can be taken for sure, because anything can be a doorway to everything. And the more evolved the perspective of the teacher as they keep growing, the more that's understood. And because the actual energy itself is, and the relationship, like you said, the relationship to light, to life, to evolution, it's the relationship to the energy is so foundational and so present that its expression can be anything, right? And the specifics of the exercises, the training process, are become irrelevant. They're of value to a certain degree, but they are also confined. They're a little step, and it's like if you never got off of the elevator, and like walked out onto the floor, or like you never got off the steps and actually like left. You're like, oh, but this is my favorite step. It's like, that's great, but there's also one above it that you can step to, and then there's all these floors you can explore and all this stuff you can learn, and all this, from a very spiritual standpoint, this dissolution of self, this, unification with cosmic realities and beyond. And so to see from the perspective of what's beneath, and beneath that, and beneath that, and beneath that, then the expression becomes whatever that person is delightedly interested in pursuing. Whether it's learning how to read tarot, or build a community around gardening, or I don't know, like insert literally anything. The open-hearted expression, and liberation and goodwill towards the environment and the karmic web that's emanating out from them. that
Wow.
becomes the thing that's seen and looked towards. And this took me a while to like come to in terms of realizations. Like all of this is because I've acted in direct contrast to it. I've been
Mm.
the teacher who's like, nope, 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 nope. I've been the teacher who robs people of the joy of discovery. I've been the teacher who takes so much pride in themselves and what, you know, their specific skills and whatever. Like I've definitely hurt people, you know, psychologically,
Mm.
emotionally. I've had people tell me like 9 months later that I made them cry, and I was like, seriously? I thought I was giving you a gift. And you know, because I was in the space of at that time, say, of
Yeah.
dogged discipline, but you know, not everyone is exactly where you are. And wherever, and it's not a better or worse thing, right?
No.
It's like maybe this person's particular relationship to a particular knowledge set and activity is something that I can't progress through that particular door nearly to the extent that they might be able to.
Very true.
And, you know, I think it's like, that's really helps with the acceleration of growth
Mm.
and of a person's path, is to just literally like, you offer, here's the light,
Mm.
follow the light.
That's it.
You know?
Wow, Nathan, I have to say, wonderful hearing you explain it all. Really, really nicely explained, and a lot of things I've thought about, but I haven't really been able to put into words very well. But I think you've kind of summed up all of my other areas I wanted to talk about. You've done a wonderful job.
What are some other areas that
No,
you'd
that's it.
wanted
That
to
you've
touch on?
covered them all.
Ah.
Because we were going to go into a little bit of hermetics and things like that, but you've covered it all in such a better way, I think, than what I was going to ask, because you've
Mhm.
encompassed it all in that journey um, of what someone would go on. So I think, you know, how nice as well for people to be able to go on that, because you're doing these camps in nature, right? Is that correct? You're doing them out in the
Um,
forest.
well, there's access to forest.
Mm.
There, you know, it would be nice, but there's things to keep in mind, like bears and
Oh, true.
cougars and
That would ruin it,
but
wouldn't it?
and like the bitey bugs and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay,
The
and the
bear
cold.
attack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like, okay, find a total peace, and you're like, oh, what was that?
What was that, a bear?
And also like the cold and the wet. So it's this last one I did, it was, you know, end of November. And so,
Oh yeah.
you know, at
Wrong time of
night it's
year, yeah.
going down to like, you know, 2-3 degrees or whatever. And it's cold, it's wet. And for people to be able to sit, like by the end of that week, you know, I had people, we did
Mm.
a 2.5 hour to 3 hour meditation, for people to sit in the cold. And like, I mean, these guys
That's
killed it. No one moved a muscle. And that's like, that's part of the working through the process and
mm,
acclimatizing to each layer of energy. As we keep raising people's frequencies, we get to light, and then we explore a couple different permutations of what light can be and raise the frequency of the light, and people get to feel that. And but how people can do that is because we go through a bit of a process.
mm.
um, and so, you know, to sit for 3 hours, if you've never done more than, you know, 20-30 minutes of
Oh,
meditation, um, with a bunch of bugs biting you, or when it's so cold and wet out or whatever. So we do inside, then I give people exercises to go explore outside
fair
as well,
point. Yeah.
you know? So, because I want people to go into nature and have their
Mm,
relationship with nature. Even this last one, like I'll find a few different places and I'll charge it up for the students, and I'll tell them where it is if they want to go. It's explore like a relationship with trees in different ways. Like, here's a nice little grove that I charge for you guys. You can go hang out there. And even this last time, I was just like hanging out with my tree friends in that grove, and one of the students
mm,
came before class to do some of the work. So I left the student there so that they could do it, find that relationship and that connection without
mm.
me being a part of it. So it's like, it's
Sure.
their thing. So a lot of the nature is like, okay, here's some stuff to do in nature. Do this before tomorrow. Like, here's your
Mm,
homework. Like, it'll augment what we've done today so much. So nature's like, if you want to understand the elements, if you want to understand the fire element, light a little bonfire. If you want to understand water, go hang out in like a big river or like a big tide, you know, like when the waves are coming in. And it's like one of those really long types of beaches where you get the big in and the big out, and it goes for, you know, like 30 meters or 50 meters or whatever. And it's like, whoa, I've learned so much just like doing like the Tai Chi loosening, wavy, you know, the wavy Tai Chi exercises on a beach, standing for a few hours, doing a few hours of Songgong or whatever, and watching the waves come in and out, and like all these lessons of the waters. If you want to learn about air, a river has a current of air that it pulls with it. You can hang out by a river. You'll learn water and air. Hang out on a cliff. You'll learn about the air. Watch the movement of the clouds. You'll learn about the air. You'll connect to this stuff. And if whatever the other one is, the earth, go hang out in a cave, like deep in a cave. And you want to feel like the stillness, the density of the earth. Like nature is it's an incredible doorway to all of this stuff at a more dense, you know, fractal, we could say. And through that, you have these doors. So that's why I love working with people in nature, or at least doing the training maybe indoors, but in a setting where they can explore it outdoors.
That access,
You
that's
know,
cool.
yeah.
Good points all round there. Yeah. You can't really go into these, you know, what was that? Yeah. Well, Nathan, really nice. I'm really pleased we got to talk. And to really, I must say, really nice hearing you explain it in such a way. Because yeah, like I say, you know, there's experience of these things, but I'm not great at explaining them or putting them out into words. But you did what you said completely sort of resonates with a lot of my experiences. So thank you for sharing. Um, I'll give you the final word. Anything else you'd like to share with us? Tell us about anything you're up to, where people can find about more information on your podcast, your YouTube, all that kind of stuff. And of
Yeah,
course, I'll
sure.
put this all below in the description as well.
Perfect. The final word. Yeah, so we'll look at some of those logistics there. I just want to thank you as well. We've been sort of in communication for a couple of years, you know, like, you know, different parts of Asia, different time zones. And I wanted to thank you for the openness with which you share on your Perseus type of academy, and like the desire to just share people's work and different explorations and expressions that people have gone through. It's very much in contrast to this so common, like, okay, let's put everything else over here and here's me, you know?
Yes.
So it's something that I really appreciate about how you share things is like, here's some cool stuff, guys. If you're into it, check it out. And I think it does a lot of good for sort of spreading the good vibes all around. So
Awesome.
thank you for
Thanks for
that.
that.
And also for the way you listen. It brings through somewhat cohesive, I hope, through flows of words.
Definitely.
I know people get on my case about being very wordy and not knowing what I'm going to say because I never know what I'm going to say. I'm like, well, come on, light. What is it? What do we do?
Where is it? Where is it? No, it was
Yeah,
perfect. Really. Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll put some information, but I think from what I know, we've got the website, haven't we? For
Mm.
you, we've got the YouTube, and I've also got your podcast. Is there anything else?
Yeah, so the podcast I started recently, and it's just a fun way to have conversations with people who do weird stuff. Right now, I'm doing a series of solo episodes where I'm going through step by step this book, The
Oh, cool.
Initiation to Hermetics. So it's just a
Yeah.
walkthrough, sort of a practitioner's experience exploring that book. I came to that book um, after many years of practice, and to Hermetics after many years of very diligent, probably hard-ass kind of practice. So it's not necessarily a view through starting with that book. And also I go through sort of ways in which I think people can navigate some of the maybe negative tendencies that can arise out of energetic work. So I did an introduction this last week, and tomorrow step 1 comes out, and there'll be like an hour to an hour and a half maybe, and we just go through each step. So that'll be over the course of the next 12 weeks or so. I'll probably do beyond step 10 one more that's kind of a wrap up plus the introduction. So anyway, there'll be conversations on the podcast as well as solo stuff. On my website, I have a Tai Chi course and a QiGong course. The QiGong course is also Hermetics and sort of spiritual growth, and we go through more or less everything that I mentioned in the level 1 first week is done over the course of about a year and change in this QiGong course. So of course it starts with vital, it moves through the elements and astral, it moves through a lot of work with exploring what I call the equanimity substance, which is sort of a harmonic of the balancing of the elements, and exploration of akasha, working with light in different ways, and what Barden calls the divine attributes, or the omnis, I call them, as sort of towards the end of that course. So you have the Tai Chi course, the QiGong course, and then also the Zenden, which is a Q&A. I borrowed that name from my friend. I'm sure you've heard of Dinesh. His old garage, like his sort of man cave, I think he called the Zenden back in the day.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he told me that, and I was like, oh, I got to use that. That's a great name. So that's a Q&A video reference library. So any questions people have as they're going through the coursework, they can email them in, and then or drop them beneath the lessons, and I throw up a video answers for them. And that's where the more extensive answers, all the details and exercises and stuff go. On the YouTube, when people ask questions on the YouTube, I talk a little bit more about things, but we don't necessarily go into the specifics of all the exercises. And the YouTube channel, the Maverick Mystic, I just go for walks, and whatever might want to come out comes out. Sometimes there's big absences of videos. If I don't have anything that's coming through, then I don't post anything. But I also release the podcast there as well. That's the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast, and you can find that on YouTube, and you can also find it on Spotify. And the last thing to, I suppose, plug at the moment is the workshop. I'm doing a retreat, level 1 and 2, which is a 16-day retreat in June 2025, and that will be in British Columbia in Powell River. And so we'll go through everything that we discussed here in the week 1, plus other stuff as well, because it's always dependent. Everything shifts based off who's there. And then the level 2, where we'll be exploring some more relationships with introductions of more cosmic magic in the planetary sense, spheric magic work in relation to spheric energies, and as well as some invocation, which some might look at as deity yoga in another sense. So
Wonderful.
that's all kind of part of the level 2, and that's in June, along with the level 1 and 2 back to back, 16 days straight of busting ourselves open to whatever's up there and in here and out there and in here. So yeah, man, that's what's going on.
Awesome. So much good stuff. I mean, basically, yeah, we'll put all that information below, so you can send that all over to me. I'll finish the recording now, so I just want to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Nathan, obviously, for sharing so much. Thank you to you guys for watching this episode. Nathan, I'll stop the recording now, but do stay on the line. Guys, check the description box below. You'll see all of Nathan's links. Go over there, subscribe, listen to his podcast, and check out his website. Okay. And I will see everyone on the next episode. Bye-bye.